Hi, I'm Anna Thurgood from State Library of Queensland, which is where I am today, and you've joined us for our 20 Curators Talk series. Today we're going behind the lens with Brian Cassie. So, hi Brian, welcome.
Hi Anna, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Just wanted to remind the audiences out there to leave your comments or ask questions because Brian and I will be online to answer those. Right, so we're going to get into our first question, which is one that I'm asking all photographers, Brian, and that is, when did you first get into photography?
Right. I was on holiday as about an 11-year-old with my mum and dad in the Isle of Wight in the UK. And we went into Woolworths and I spied a little camera, a little tiny plastic thing, 2 and 6, and I nagged my mum and dad to buy it for me. They were they weren't interested. They said, for 2 and 6, it's going to be a piece of rubbish, but I persisted and got my own way and had this nice basic little plastic camera.
Right, and so that's the next question is, what sort of camera did you use?
Right. It was called a VP Twin.
Wow.
So basic, it was just like 2 pieces of plastic and you had to put a coin in a slot and twist it to open it to load the film. And the viewfinder was a piece of wire. It was and it only had just one little shutter thing, no adjustments, no nothing. You just went like that.
Do you still have any photographs taken on that little camera?
Yeah, I do actually, yeah. I had an exhibition a couple of years ago called A Photographer's Life Part 1 down in Sydney and in Cairns, and the leading image was the first picture from that first roll of film, which was an ocean, the Queen Elizabeth leaving Southampton. Oh, that's what you do, take pictures of boy things like ocean liners and steam trains and stuff.
Yes, yes. That's amazing that you still have photographs.
Yeah, I've still got the negatives from that first roll.
Incredible. So when did you become really serious about photography then?
Well, from the age of 11, I progressed in cameras, to Kodak Brownie and then, onwards from there. And I went and did motor racing as a teenager and things like that and got a better camera and your cameras progress. So by the late teens, I had an SLR and I did my first shots for money, which were football. I was football mad over in England, obviously, and it was a long story, actually. I played football, obviously. Like every boy over there played football, and our soccer coach, manager, was the editor of a local newspaper, a small local newspaper. And I just said to him, look, I'd love to take pictures of the football, sort of half jesting. And he said, well, all right, then go and do this game on Saturday. And I had no idea what I was doing, but it took off from there.
That's great. So then how did you get into photojournalism?
Well, like I said, originally I was doing all sport in London. I was in London and England. I was covering football matches around the country. And around the 20 mark, I left England and came to Australia. I'd also done news for papers in England. And I came to Australia and found myself in Cairns. Oh, actually, no, I found myself in Brisbane 2 weeks before the floods, the big floods.
In 74?
Yeah, that was it. And I rang up, I rang the Courier Mail and the Australian and said, look, I'm here, I know what I'm doing. If you need me, I'm available. And they said, well, if you can actually get in, we'll use you. So within a couple of weeks, I was taking news images for the Courier Mail and the Australian. And the first one I had published was an image of a cow being dragged out of the river under the Story Bridge.
Wow, that's amazing. So the timing was...
Now I've lost it.
Timing was pretty good.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
So how did you end up in Cairns then? Why?
Oh, that's a long story. And I don't think we'll go too deeply into that one.
Okay.
No, I didn't even know, I'd never even heard of Cairns. I spent about a year in Brisbane and then got offered a job, actually, running a computer department for a little credit company. I forgot what they call it now. Anyway, but it was in Cairns. So I asked a few questions, what's Cairns like? And they said it's paradise, nobody wears much and, everybody gets drunk all the time. So,
Sounded pretty
and
good.
it was like the Wild West when I got here. But in retrospect, it was a great move because I was based in Cairns. I was the only one doing this sort of thing in Cairns. It was closer to the South Pacific than, say, Sydney or Melbourne, closer to Southeast Asia than Sydney.
Yeah, so it was a good placement,
It was a
good location.
Not only that, it's a fascinating part of the world.
It is. Yeah, incredibly beautiful too.
Yeah.
So I guess, you've spoken about getting into that photojournalism world. Have you been able to make a full-time living from photography from that point on?
Oh, yeah, for far too long. It's been far too long. Yeah, I've there was an interlude when in Cairns I also owned a restaurant, which is, but all the time I had that, I was still doing photography, photojournalism. Yeah.
Okay. So I'd just like to remind our audiences that I'm Anna Thurgood from State Library of Queensland, curator of the 22 Decades of Queensland Photography exhibition, and you're watching our Behind the Lens series. Today I'm talking to Brian Cassie, a well-known photojournalist who's based in Cairns. And I'm just encouraging everyone to leave comments or ask questions because Brian and I will be on the line to answer those. So my next question, you've covered some of the biggest events to have happened in the Asia-Pacific region in the last 20 years. You were saying you're well located to cover those stories. Could you name a few for us?
Well, the biggest one is probably the Asian tsunami, the Boxing Day tsunami. I covered that in Thailand, Indonesia, and even a little trip into Myanmar. Covered it in Phuket. That was the first week or two in Phuket, and then went on to Banda Aceh. Oh, and there was Myanmar in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was pretty horrific, but as a professional, it's where you want it to be.
Yeah. Yes. So that was going to be my next question. So, I hear photographers talking about feeling separate from what's going on, like you somehow can separate yourself because you're behind that lens. But, you're taking photographs, you've covered these major events like refugees being evacuated from East Timor or cyclones that have passed over people's houses and lives. So, people are at their most vulnerable and that must be quite difficult sometimes. So how do you cope with that?
It certainly is. You're certainly right about being behind the lens. You're doing a job and you're trying to portray what you're covering to the best of your ability. And it is probably opposite to what the people you're photographing want to be doing, But you have to see it as something necessary. You're there to do, that's what you're there to do. That doesn't mean to say you distance yourself from the people. For example, covering Cyclone Yassi, we were flown in, or we had a helicopter as soon as the cyclone passed, and we flew down to Mission Beach and Hull Heads and Tully and stuff like that. I remember we landed in Hull Heads, which was decimated not only by the cyclone but by the storm surge. And when we landed, we met two brothers, elderly brothers, who'd lost everything. Their houses had been scoured clean. And when we arrived, one of them just came up and sobbed on the shoulder. I had to comfort him, but then I had to get pictures as well. So you have to talk to them, do what you can, and then take your images. And the worst part is leaving them after that. So you come into their lives at the worst time and you've taken their images and then you're leaving. However, after that, what I usually try and do, if at all possible, it's not always possible overseas, but in Australia, I tried to go back. And these brothers, I went back to see them on a dozen occasions afterwards during various periods of their recovery. And I was even there when they turned the sod on their new houses, sometime later. So you try and keep a connection. It's not always possible, but that's the idea.
So do you think these people who, Queensland, our major thing is, natural disasters, wild weather, flooding, cyclones. Do you think these people are traumatised? Do you think they've experienced real trauma?
Oh, yeah. There seems to be this bit up here in North Queensland, cyclones. We've seen them all, and there is that blasé sort of toughing it out sort of attitude. But when it actually happens, people are really traumatized.
Yeah. Which event do you think has affected you the most out of all of the things that you've photographed?
Oh, God, blimey. Hang on a minute. I'm going to think. It's a little bit. I think different characters react to sort of disasters and things like that in different ways. Going back to the Asian tsunami was covered by some of the most experienced journalists and photojournalists in the world. And I know a lot of I was working for the British media, and they are hardened, you know. I've got a really good friend, a journalist. He's not a photographer, a journalist, and he's ex-Fleet Street. He's seen everything. He's covered some of the most major stories around the planet, you know, Ronnie Biggs in South America and all sorts of things. And he was totally traumatized after the Asian tsunami, and that really surprised me. And I sort of got back. I covered it for a few weeks and got back home, and I was concerned that I wasn't affected too adversely by it, if you know what I mean. You sort of worry about, what's wrong with me? You know. So it's affects different people different ways.
And perhaps a coping mechanism, that you've developed over many years.
Yeah, I think you tend
with all your experience.
It helps to have a short memory, I think.
That's true. This exhibition 20, we've featured some really astonishing images of yours, particularly, as I said, relating to those extreme weather events, such as Cyclone Larry and Cyclone Yasi. There's one image in particular of a woman. She's standing in front of her house, which is completely destroyed behind her. She's got cuts all over her face and her chest after Cyclone Larry had passed overhead. Can you tell me a bit about who she is? And
yeah, I can. Yeah. Well, we'll start from the beginning. As soon as Larry passed and the winds abated, I took off up to to an in-state hospital, and an ambulance came out, and that's why I was there, just in case an ambulance came out. And I followed the ambulance. So followed this ambulance as we weaved through fallen power lines and debris and all that stuff, and turned up at this house that was completely destroyed. And that's where I found Kate. Kate was, considering the state she was in, she was a remarkable good strength of character. I started talking to her and I said, how are you, etc., etc. And what happened? Tell me what happened. And she said, she told us about being in the house that night as Larry just ripped it apart piece by piece. And, she crawled out in the morning, and that's how she crawled out. Oh, she's had a little bit of the blood sort of cleaned off it,
Yeah.
She was quite happy to be photographed. However, down the track a little bit, that was sort of seen as the image of Cyclone Larry.
Yeah, she was on the front page of
front page of the Courier Mail, and it was syndicated around the planet.
Yeah.
And she used to get mountains and mountains of phone calls from media after that, and she got fed up with it.
Yeah.
I don't blame her. And eventually she left in Israel, so I don't know now. Yeah.
She just didn't want to keep reliving it, I suppose.
Yeah, she got totally sick of being bested. She just wanted to forget about it. Like who wouldn't? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm just reminding everyone that my name's Anna. I work at the State Library of Queensland. I curated the exhibition 22 Decades of Queensland Photography, and I'm going behind the lens today with Brian Cassie, quite a well-known photojournalist based in Cairns in North Queensland. So we're going to go on to our next question. How do you know when you've captured the shot, the definitive moment? Is this something that you know there and then, or is it something that you discover later back in the studio?
Well, you have to go back to film days to answer this one, probably. When we used to shoot film, you had no idea what you got. You had an inkling because you're looking through the viewfinder, but there's no guarantee that when the films are processed and what you imagined you got was still there. So that was stressful. to say the least. But with the advent of digital, as digital's gone on and on, you do know you can have a quick squiz at the back of your camera, which saves a hell of a lot of stress.
Yeah.
But
I guess what I'm asking is, do you get a feeling though that it's like, yes, I've captured something here?
Yeah, well, it's you're always trying to get the best image you can when you're shooting, right? So you think I've got an image, great. Sometimes it's not until you get back and load it onto the computer, and then it comes up and you go, oh wow, that is quite something, better than I expected, know. So I wouldn't say exactly when you shot it. Yeah. You have an idea, but not 100% positive, until you actually get it up on the screen and have a look at it and have a look at the entire image,
Yes, and often it's that, taking it out of its context in a way that you suddenly see something.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Like when you're out there in the middle of doing something, you're concentrating on that, and you think, oh, I've got an image, and that's let's go and get a better one, or or we have to go, or something like that. Yeah. But it's when you get back and download, and then you think, oh, great, cool.
Yeah. Cool. So my next question is a bit of a big question. So with the rise of smartphone technology, everybody has quite a good camera and a powerful video camera in their pocket. We've seen the impact of this recently with the filming of the death of George Floyd in America at the hands of police. How do you feel about the general public becoming the source of news footage? Do you think this is a good thing?
It's not something we can control, so there's no point stressing over it. Now, we can't be in the places where news happens constantly. Like George Floyd, if you're not there, you're not there. I mean, and it's probably a good thing that there are people there that have the ability to take an image to bear witness about what has happened, because we're not there. We sort of take over once that image is out there, and we do the follow-up better than any member of the public can ever do it.
Yes.
But those initial images, we not there, we can't, it's great that somebody else is there.
Yeah.
So you can't see it as a negative.
No. I think it's an amazing thing that we are able to shine a light on these things that maybe would have remained hidden before. So
exactly. There's no guarantee that George Floyd's aggressor would have been arrested or convicted or charged without that picture.
Yeah. Okay, so we're getting close to running out of time, but I do have one more question. So, photography obviously has undergone major changes in the last 20 years, which we've spoken about with smartphones, but especially with the move from analog to digital. I'm just wondering how you feel about it. Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing?
I shot film for several decades, and I spent a great chunk of my life in dark rooms playing with chemicals and leaving smelling rather badly and having accidents when you're processing films and, making dozens of prints of one image just to get it perfect. And to me, digital's far better. I'm much happier. It's not like when digital first came to the fore, people said, oh, that's it, it's going to be so easy now. It isn't, because post-processing takes almost as much time as processing and printing used to these days, or it can do. But it's infinitely cleaner and it's infinitely easier, I suppose you could say. And we can now have an image filed in seconds rather than hours.
Yes.
That's the other positive.
So in that world of media, it's a useful tool.
Oh, it is. But having said that, the fact that we can have images now sent in seconds means we have more deadlines. In the old days with film, you had one deadline. Now you've got deadlines throughout the day. So it's changed the entire system.
Yeah. All right, well, that's brought us to the end of our time together. I'm sure there's a lot more we could have spoken about, but thank you very much for joining us today, Brian, with our Curators Talk Behind the Lens.
And thank you very much indeed too.
Thanks, Brian.